The first time I saw him, I thought he looked like trouble wrapped in a varsity jacket. And the worst part? Trouble had the kind of smile that made you forget you were supposed to stay away. Ethan Hayes walked into our creative writing class 15 minutes late, like he owned the place. Everyone's heads turned, girls whispering, a few guys rolling their eyes. But I just froze, because fate, or maybe the cruel hand of some cosmic comedian, had just paired me with him for the semester project. I, Alex Carter, had one goal this semester: survive college quietly. New campus, new apartment, new life. After moving from Oregon to this small college town in Pennsylvania, I was desperate to keep a low profile, to focus on my writing, and to forget about everything I had left behind. What I didn't expect was Ethan, loud, arrogant, infuriating Athanto, crash into my life, not only as my writing partner but also as the neighbor who lived in the apartment right across the hall. The irony? He didn't know it yet. That first day in class, Professor Jennings announced the project with a glint in his eye, as if he enjoyed throwing us into chaos. You'll be paired randomly. One story, 2 authors, due by the end of the semester. I expect collaboration, not compromise. When Ethan slid into the seat beside me, dropping his notebook with a loud thud, I felt my throat tighten. He smelled faintly of cedarwood cologne and fresh laundry, the kind of scent that made you think of bonfires and autumn nights. He gave me a grin, cocky, effortless, like he was used to charming his way out of everything. So, looks like we're partners, he said, leaning back in his chair. His voice was smooth, the kind that carried across a room without trying. I nodded, forcing myself to keep my expression neutral. Yeah, Alex. Ethan, he replied, like I didn't already know. Everyone knew. Ethan Hayes was on the soccer team, popular enough to never eat alone in the cafeteria, yet mysterious enough that people made up stories about him. And me? I was the guy who just moved into apartment 3B with 2 cardboard boxes and a head full of unfinished stories. By the time class ended, Ethan had scribbled his number across the top of my notebook page, his messy scrawl looping into my margin notes. Text me. We should get coffee or something. Figure out how this is going to work. I wanted to roll my eyes, to tell him I wasn't here for small talk. But instead, I tucked the paper into my pocket, the faint warmth of his ink lingering like a dare. That night, back in my new apartment, I heard loud music from across the hall. Laughter, voices, the thump of bass. My neighbor was clearly throwing some kind of party. With my hoodie pulled over my head, I tried to block it out, until I stepped into the hallway with my trash bag and saw him. Ethan. He was leaning against his doorframe, drink in hand, laughing with a group of friends. His eyes caught mine, and for a second, something flickered there like he recognized me. But then one of his friends pulled him back inside, and the door slammed shut before he could say anything. He hadn't made the connection yet. The next week, Ethan and I met at a campus coffee shop to brainstorm. It was awkward at first, him sipping his iced latte while I tried not to stare. So, he began, tapping his pen against the table. What do you like to write? I hesitated. The truth? I wrote stories about boys who loved boys. Stories that had been tucked away in journals under my bed. Hidden from my parents, hidden from everyone. Stories I wasn't ready to say out loud. Mostly character-driven stuff, I answered carefully. Relationships, emotions, that kind of thing. He raised an eyebrow. Deep. I usually go for action, twists, suspense. I smirked, surprising myself. So basically explosions and car chases. He grinned. Exactly. Guess we'll have to meet in the middle. Something about his smile made my chest tighten. It wasn't just cocky, it was warm, disarming. And that scared me more than anything. Over the next few weeks, our meetings became routine. Coffee shops, late-night library sessions, scattered papers, and shared laughter. We argued about plot lines, teased each other's writing styles, and slowly, carefully, began to fit like puzzle pieces. But outside of class, in the hallway of our apartment building, I kept my distance. He still hadn't realized that I was the guy across the hall. Maybe it was cowardice, maybe it was self-preservation, but I wasn't ready for him to know. Because the truth was, I was already starting to like him. And if he found out that his writing partner was also his neighbor, the quiet guy who overheard his late-night arguments on the phone, who saw him stumble and drunk after soccer games, who caught glimpses of his loneliness behind closed doors, would he push me away? The thought was unbearable. One rainy evening, after hours of rewriting a scene together, Ethan leaned back in his chair and sighed. You ever feel like you're living two different lives? His words hit me harder than I expected. I froze, pen hovering above my notebook. What do you mean? He shrugged, staring out the coffee shop window at the blurred lights. Like, the person everyone sees, and then the person you actually are. And you're just hoping nobody notices the cracks. My heart pounded. He was speaking my language, pulling words straight out of my chest. Yeah, I whispered. I know what that's like. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside the window disappeared. The laughter, the rain, the traffic, it all faded until it was just him and me, sitting in a corner booth with something dangerous sparking between us. I should have looked away, but I didn't, and that was the beginning of the unraveling. Because no matter how much I tried to keep my distance, Ethan Hayes was becoming more than a partner, more than a neighbor. He was becoming a story I couldn't stop writing, even if it meant breaking myself open in the process. The next few weeks unfolded like a slow burn I couldn't control. Every time Ethan laughed too loud or leaned in too close during our study sessions, I felt like someone had lit a match inside my chest. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that it was just a stupid crush on a boy I barely knew. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to lie to myself. And the cruelest part? He still had no idea. Every night, I'd hear his footsteps echoing in the hallway, his door clicking shut, music playing faintly through the thin apartment walls. Sometimes I'd imagine him lying in his bed just a few feet away, staring at the same cracked ceiling I did. We were so close, yet he didn't know. One night, as I sat on the floor of my apartment revising a draft we were working on, I heard a soft knock. My stomach dropped. Nobody knocked on my door, not yet. Not here. When I opened it, my breath caught. Ethan stood there. His hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly at the edges. He was wearing a hoodie, hands shoved deep in the pockets. His expression a strange mix of frustration and something softer. Hey, he said almost awkwardly. I clutched the doorknob. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to know. Hey. He squinted at me, then glanced at the door number above my head. His brows furrowed. Wait a second. You live here. My heart sank. The secret was over. Yeah, I admitted, voice quiet. Across the hall from you, actually. For a moment, he just stared. Then, to my shock, he laughed, this low, disbelieving sound that made my skin prickle. You've been here the whole time? Right across from me. I nodded, guilt prickling at the back of my neck. I didn't know how to tell you. Instead of getting angry, he just leaned against the doorframe, shaking his head. Unbelievable. All those times I walked past your door. He trailed off, his eyes flicking up to meet mine. Guess the universe really wants us stuck together. Something in his voice, light but edged with meaning, made my chest ache. From then on, things changed. We no longer just met in coffee shops or libraries. Ethan started knocking on my door, barging in without warning, collapsing on my couch with his laptop and a bag of chips. He filled my quiet little apartment with noise and life, and despite my protests, I let him. One night, while he sprawled out on the floor editing our draft, I asked, "Don't you have like a million friends to hang out with?" He shrugged, not looking up from the screen. Yeah, but I like it here. Different. Different how? He hesitated. His green eyes flicked to me, then away. Quieter. Realer. Nobody's trying to impress anyone. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just watched him. The way his hair fell into his eyes, the faint crease in his brow when he concentrated, it all felt too much, too close. The tension built slowly like pressure under glass. Every accidental brush of his hand against mine, every too long glance, every joke that landed just a little too intimately, it all stacked up until I felt like I was holding my breath all the time. But Ethan had a girlfriend. Her name was Madison. Blonde, pretty, always posting pictures of herself at soccer games with her arm around his waist. He never mentioned her around me, but I knew. Everyone knew. And every time I saw her on his Instagram feed, smiling like she belonged in his life, something inside me cracked a little more. I tried to pull back, tried to remind myself that whatever was happening between us wasn't real. But Ethan made it impossible. One night in late October, we were in my apartment again, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. Rain battered against the windows, the kind of storm that made the whole world feel smaller. Ethan was reading aloud one of my paragraphs, his voice low and steady. He wanted to tell him the truth, but the words stayed locked inside, trapped by fear. He set the paper down, looking at me with a curious tilt of his head. "This feels personal." My throat tightened. I forced a shrug. "It's fiction." "Yeah, but..." He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "You write like someone who knows what it's like. Keeping secrets. Wanting something you can't say." My pulse hammered in my ears. For a second, I thought he saw right through me. "Everyone has secrets," I managed. "True," he said softly. Then, almost without thinking, he reached out and brushed his fingers against mine. It was the lightest touch, barely the rebut. It felt like lightning. I froze, staring at our hands. He didn't move away. His eyes searched mine, something raw flickering there, something dangerous. Then, as if realizing what he'd done, he pulled back quickly, clearing his throat. "Sorry. It's fine," I said too quickly. My heart was in my throat, my hands trembling. We sat in silence, the storm outside filling the space between us. And in that silence, I realized I was in deeper than I ever intended. Days passed, but that moment lingered like a ghost. Every time Ethan smiled at me, every time his shoulder brushed mine in the hallway, I thought about it, about how close we were to crossing a line. But he never mentioned it again. Neither did I. Instead, we poured ourselves into the story. Late nights blurred into early mornings, our fictional characters becoming a reflection of us two people caught in a web of secrets, afraid to say the truth out loud. One evening, Ethan sent me a text. "Can you meet me outside?" When I opened my door, he was leaning against the wall, hood pulled up, a restless energy in his movements. "Want to go for a walk?" he asked. It was freezing out, but I nodded. We wandered through the quiet streets, the air sharp with November chill. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan sighed, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. "You ever feel like you're pretending? Like everyone thinks you're one thing, but you're really something else?" I swallowed hard. "All the time." He glanced at me, eyes dark under the streetlights. "Yeah, thought so." Something in his tone made me ache, like he was saying more than his words aloud. Before I could respond, a car drove past, splashing water onto the curb, breaking the moment. Ethan laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the weight of what he'd almost said. The cracks in his mask started to show after that. He'd show up at my door late at night, quieter than usual, asking if we could just sit and watch a movie instead of writing. Sometimes he'd fall asleep on my couch, his head tipped back, lips parted slightly, and I'd sit there, heart aching, wondering how I was supposed to survive this. One night, around Thanksgiving, he told me about his dad. How he never felt like he was good enough, how soccer was the only thing that kept the pressure at bay. "He wants me to be perfect," Ethan said bitterly. "But I'm not. I'm never gonna be." "You don't have to be perfect," I whispered. He looked at me then, his eyes so raw, so vulnerable, that I had to look away. Because in that moment, I wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to tell him that he was enough, that I saw him not the soccer star, not the golden boy, but the person underneath. But the words stayed locked inside, just like always. And yet, despite everything, the secrets, the tension, the unspoken feelings, I couldn't stop. Couldn't stop letting him in. Couldn't stop wanting him. Even though I knew it would break me. December arrived with its gray skies and sharp winds, and with it came a shift I couldn't quite name. The project that had started as a class requirement had become a lifeline. Every page we wrote seemed to reveal another piece of ourselves we were too afraid to say out loud. But outside of those pages, silence built between us like a wall. It wasn't that Ethan avoided me, far from it. He was still in my apartment nearly every day, still stealing my snacks, still leaving his shoes by the door like he lived there. But something had changed since that night in November when his fingers brushed mine. It was like we were standing on the edge of something neither of us dared to name. Finals week hit hard, the campus buzzing with stress and sleepless nights. One evening, Ethan sprawled on my floor, textbooks scattered around him, groaning dramatically. "I swear Jennings has it out for us," he said, tossing his pen in the air. "This final project is going to kill me." "You mean our project," I corrected, smirking. He shot me a look, grinning. "Right, our project, which you've already done like 90% of. Admit it, you're carrying me." I rolled my eyes. "You're not that useless." "Wow," he said, clutching his chest like I'd wounded him. High praise from Alex Carter. I laughed despite myself. And for a moment it was easy just us, the way it had been at the start. But then his smile faltered. He hesitated, his eyes flicking to my lips before darting away. My breath caught. He hadn't meant for me to notice, but I did. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of his fleeting glance burned into my mind. What if I wasn't imagining it? What if he felt it too? But then Madison's face flashed in my head, her perfect smile. Her hands wrapped around his waist in every photo, and reality came crashing back. I couldn't let myself believe in something that wasn't mine to have. A few days later, the inevitable happened. I was walking back to the apartment with Ethan, our conversation light and easy, when we heard a voice call his name. "Ethan." I turned. Madison was jogging toward us, her blonde hair bouncing, her smile wide. She threw her arms around him, kissing him like the world had paused just for them. My stomach dropped. Ethan hugged her back, but I noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his eyes flicked to me when she wasn't looking. "Hey, babe," she said, finally pulling back. "I didn't know you were around tonight." "Yeah," he muttered. "Just walking back with Alex." Her gaze landed on me, curious. "Oh, you're the writing partner, right?" I forced a polite smile. "Yeah, that's me." She didn't say much after that, just clung to his arm and pulled him toward her car. He glanced back at me once, his expression unreadable, before disappearing into the night with her. I stood there alone, my chest hollow. The days after that were harder. Ethan still came around, but there was a distance in him now. He'd sit on my couch scrolling through his phone, answering her texts with a distracted look, and I'd pretend it didn't hurt, but it did. One evening I finally broke. "You don't have to come here, you know, if she's waiting for you." He looked up sharply. "What?" "Madison," I said, my voice tight. "You don't have to split your time. I'm fine on my own." Something flickered across his face, anger, maybe, or hurt. "You think that's why I'm here?" I swallowed hard. "Isn't it?" He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "God, Alex, you really don't get it, do you?" My heart pounded. "Then explain it." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he would finally say a thing hanging between us, suffocating us both. But instead, he shook his head, grabbed his jacket, and walked out. The door slammed behind him, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Days turned into a week. He didn't come over, didn't text. The absence was sharp, like losing air. I buried myself in our project, rewriting scenes alone at my kitchen table, trying not to think about him. But the truth was, every word I wrote was about him anyway. The night before our final project was due, there was another knock at my door. I opened it, and there he was. Ethan looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw tight. He held out a stack of papers. "Here, the last chapter." I took it silently, setting it on the table. "Alex," he said, his voice low. I didn't look at him. "You should be with her." "I don't want to be with her," he said sharply. That made me freeze. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. They were blazing with something fierce, something desperate. "What are you saying?" I whispered. He took a step closer. "I'm saying, I can't stop thinking about you, about us, and it's driving me insane." My breath caught. The words I'd been dying to hear and dreading were finally here, but fear tangled with hope in my chest. "Ethan, you can't." "Yes, I can," he cut in. "Because whatever this is, it's real. And I don't care how messed up it looks." I shook my head, panic rising. "You have a girlfriend. People will judge. Your team, your family." "I don't care," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm tired of pretending. With you, I don't have to." For a moment, everything stopped. The air between us was electric, heavy with everything we'd been holding back. And then he stepped forward and kissed me. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was desperate, like he'd been holding it in for too long. His hands cupped my face, his lips crashing against mine, and I felt myself unravel. I kissed him back, all the fear and longing pouring out of me at once. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, he whispered, "See, that's the truth." I stared at him, my heart racing. "Ethan." But before I could say more, there was another knock on the door. A sharp, insistent knock. Ethan stiffened. I opened the door, and my stomach dropped. Madison. Her eyes flicked from me to him, then back again. Her face paled as realization set in. "What the hell?" she whispered. The room spun. My world, already fragile, shattered in an instant. That night would change everything. Madison's voice cracked like glass. "How long has this been going on?" Her words seemed to hang in the air, sharp and cutting. Ethan froze beside me, his jaw clenched, his hand still half raised as if he'd forgotten he was holding me just seconds ago. I stepped back instinctively, guilt and panic crashing over me. "It's not," I began, but Ethan interrupted. "It just happened," he said firmly, his voice low but steady. "But it's real." Madison blinked at him, her face pale with disbelief. "You've been lying to me? To everyone?" Ethan took a step forward. "I'm sorry, Maddie. I should have been honest with you, but I couldn't. I didn't even know how to admit it to myself until now." Her eyes flicked to me again, full of betrayal, like I was the thief who'd stolen something that belonged to her. My stomach twisted. "Unbelievable," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and stormed down the hall, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. The slam of the stairwell door echoed in the silence she left behind. I turned to Ethan, my chest heaving. "What did you just do?" "The right thing," he said simply, though his voice trembled. "Ethan, she deserved the truth," he said. Then his gaze softened, his hand reaching for mine. "And so do you." I should have pulled away. I should have told him this was a mistake, that it would ruin us both. But when his fingers brushed mine, I didn't move, because for the first time I believed him. The days after Madison's discovery were chaos. Word spread faster than I could have imagined. By Monday, whispers followed us down the halls of campus. Some were curious, some cruel. The soccer team cornered Ethan in the locker room. I didn't hear the exact words, but I saw the bruise on his jaw the next day and knew enough. "You don't have to do this," I told him as we sat in the library, his hood pulled low over his face. "If you want Toyf, you need to go back. Pretend it never." He cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Pretend? Alex, I'm done pretending. Do you get that?" His eyes were fierce, but underneath I saw the exhaustion. "I don't care what they say. Not anymore." But I cared. I cared enough for both of us. Because every time someone sneered, every time I overheard Madison's friends whispering in the cafeteria, I felt the weight of it pressing down. The breaking point came when Ethan's father showed up. I was in my apartment when I heard the shouting through the wall. His voice was deep, angry, reverberating with disappointment. Throwing your future away. What the hell are you thinking? Embarrassing the family." I pressed my hands to my ears, but the words still seeped through. Later, Ethan knocked on my door. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. Without a word, he walked inside and collapsed onto my couch. He wants me to quit the team, Ethan said hoarsely. Says I've ruined everything. I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. It's not your fault. I made my choice. He looked at me then, his eyes raw and unguarded. And I'd make it again. The weight of his words settled over me, terrifying and beautiful all at once. Our final project presentation was scheduled for the end of the semester. By then, the tension was unbearable. Some classmates avoided us, others stared openly. Madison sat in the back row, her arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut. When it was our turn, Ethan stood beside me at the podium. He looked calm, but I could feel the tremor in his hand as it brushed mine. We read our story aloud about two boys who found each other in a world that tried to tear them apart. The words felt heavier now, sharper, because they weren't just fiction anymore. They were us. When we finished, the room was silent. Then, slowly, someone clapped. Another joined. And another. Until the sound filled the room. Not unanimous, but enough. Ethan glanced at me. A small, defiant smile on his lips. Winter break came. The campus emptied, leaving the apartment building eerily quiet. I expected Ethan to go home, to mend things with his family. But he didn't. Instead, he knocked on my door one snowy evening, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Thought we could celebrate surviving Jennings, he said lightly, though his eyes were tired. We sat by the window, watching the snow blanket the street. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. Are you sure about this? About us? He turned to me, his expression steady. Alex, I've never been more sure of anything. The conviction in his voice made my chest ache. I set my mug down, my hands trembling. I'm scared. I know, he said softly. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. But maybe we can be scared together. Something in me gave way then. I leaned into him, and for the first time it didn't feel like falling. Felt like landing. The spring semester began with new challenges. The whispers hadn't stopped, and some teammates still avoided Ethan. His father barely spoke to him. Madison passed me in the halls without a word, her eyes cold. But amidst all that, there was us. We studied together, wrote together, cooked terrible pasta dinners in my kitchen. He kissed me in the quiet corners of the library, held my hand in the crowded quad. Sometimes people stared. Sometimes they didn't. And slowly I learned to stop caring. Because love, I realized, wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about choosing someone again and again, even when it was hard. On the night of the spring writing showcase, our story was selected to be read aloud by the faculty. As I stood backstage, nerves twisting in my stomach, Ethan squeezed my hand. You've got this, he whispered. No, I said, meeting his eyes. We've got this. When we stepped onto the stage, the lights blinding, I thought back to the first day of class, the cocky boy who strolled in late, the quiet neighbor across the hall who wanted nothing more than to disappear. Neither of us could have imagined we'd end up here. But we had. And as I looked out at the sea of faces, then back at him, I knew this was just the beginning of our story. When the applause came, loud and unrestrained, Ethan leaned close, his lips brushing my ear. Told you, he murmured. The universe wanted us stuck together. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes, and for once, I didn't feel like I was hiding anymore. Because he was right. The universe had brought us together through chance, through chaos, through pain. And maybe it hadn't been easy, maybe it never would be. But it was ours. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.